At 11 years old, he made a mistake that cost him millions of dollars. Not in theory, in real life. And that mistake shaped the mindset that later made him one of the richest investors in history. That boy was Warren Buffett. But long before he became one of the most successful investors in the world, he was just a curious kid in Omaha, Nebraska, trying to understand one thing: how does money grow? As a child, Buffett would walk door to door selling chewing gum and bottles of Coca-Cola, earning just a few cents at a time. Most people would see that as a simple childhood hustle. But for Buffett, it was something else. It was the beginning of an obsession. He wasn't just trying to make money. He was trying to understand how money multiplies. So at 11 years old, he made his first real investment. He bought 3 shares of City Service stock. The price was $38 per share. For a kid, that was nearly everything he had. And then something terrifying happened. The stock dropped. $38 down to $27. For an 11-year-old who had invested almost all his savings, watching that number fall felt like a disaster. But eventually the price recovered. It climbed back up to $40. Relieved, Buffett sold the stock and locked in a small profit. Crisis avoided. Or so he thought. Because what happened next stayed with him for the rest of his life. The stock kept rising. $50. $100. Eventually, $200. That moment burned a lesson into Buffett's mind that he would never forget. Patience is often the difference between small gains and extraordinary wealth. And decades later, that patience would turn him into one of the richest investors in history. But Buffett's real genius wasn't just investing. It was how he thought. Years later, Buffett shared a strange thought experiment with students at Columbia University while speaking alongside Bill Gates. He told them to imagine something unusual. Imagine that for your entire life, you could only make 20 investment decisions. That's it. Every time you invested, you had to punch a hole in a small card. Once those 20 punches were gone, you could never invest again. Suddenly, the room went quiet. Because if that rule existed, nobody would rush into random investments. Nobody would chase hype. Nobody would panic during market crashes. Instead, people would slow down. They would study companies carefully. They would think long-term. Buffett explained that if investors behaved this way, most of them would become far more successful. Because wealth often comes from doing less, but doing it better. One of the best real-life examples of this philosophy was Buffett's investment in the Coca-Cola Company. In the late 1980s, he invested billions of dollars into the company. At the time, many people thought the decision was boring. After all, it was just a soda company. But Buffett wasn't buying a drink. He was buying something far more powerful. A brand that had been part of people's lives for generations. Every single day, billions of Coca-Cola drinks are opened somewhere in the world. A bottle in New York, a can in Tokyo, a glass in a small cafe in Brazil. And Buffett saw something simple but powerful. If the company could earn just a little more from each drink, that tiny increase, multiplied across billions of servings, becomes enormous. That's the kind of business Buffett loves. Companies with advantages that can last for decades. But Buffett didn't always think this way. Early in his career, he followed the strategy of his mentor, Benjamin Graham. The idea was simple: buy companies that were extremely cheap and ignored by the market. Buffett jokingly called them cigar butt investments, businesses with one last puff of value left. The problem? Many of those businesses were cheap for a reason. It was his longtime partner, Charlie Munger, who changed his thinking. Munger convinced Buffett that it is far better to buy great companies and hold them for decades than to constantly hunt for cheap bargains. That shift changed everything. It led Buffett to invest in extraordinary businesses that could grow for generations. But here's the part of Buffett's life that most people overlook. His daily routine is surprisingly simple. He spends hours reading, not checking stock prices, not reacting to breaking news, just reading biographies, history, business, psychology. Buffett once explained that knowledge builds up like compound interest. Every page you read adds a little more understanding, and over time, that knowledge grows into something incredibly powerful. That mindset is something he shares with Bill Gates. In fact, when Gates first met Buffett in 1991, the meeting was scheduled to last just 1 hour. Instead, they spent 10 hours talking about ideas, curiosity, and how the world works. Their success wasn't just intelligence. It was curiosity that never stopped growing. And before that conversation at Columbia ended, Buffett gave advice that had nothing to do with money at all. He said one of the most important decisions you'll ever make in life is who you choose to spend your life with. Because the people around you shape your habits, your character, and ultimately, your future. So when you step back and look at Buffett's life, his success didn't come from chasing quick profits. It came from a few powerful habits. Be patient when others rush. Keep learning when others stop growing. Choose great people. And choose great opportunities. Because the truth is, you don't need hundreds of perfect decisions to build a meaningful life or financial freedom. Sometimes just a handful of thoughtful choices, made with patience and curiosity, can change everything. Warren Buffett didn't become successful because he made hundreds of brilliant investments. He became successful because he made a few incredibly thoughtful ones and then had the patience to let them grow. Your life might work the same way. A few choices, the right people, the right habits, the right opportunities, not hundreds of punches, just 20. So the real question is, what will be one of yours?